This is Space Minds by SpaceNews. In this episode of Space Minds, host Mike Gruss sits down with Marshall Smith, CEO of Starlab Space, for a fireside chat at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center, the next installment of the center's Discovery series. In the fireside chat, they explored how today's commercial space pioneers are turning concepts once rooted in science fiction into operational reality.
I've been a journalist about covering space about 13 years, and one thing I'm always struck by is the role of science fiction in the space industry. Two of the titans in space right now, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, have each been honored with the Arthur C. Clarke Innovation Award, which recognizes achievements in satellite communication, space, and technology. Each of them has talked about the role of science fiction and Clarke's work played in their own lives. I mention this because I think we're at a moment now where we talk about advances in space. When we do this, we're often talking about some of the very same technology that first came into public consciousness via popular culture, whether that's science fiction books or movies or comic books. And I say that, and it's not a completely fair assessment, and it plays on a kind of cliche, right? But tonight we're going to talk with companies that have long been working on making these technologies that felt decades away, making them a reality. Starlab is developing a large single-module, 3-floor space station that's expected to launch in 2029. Astrobotic is developing a large lunar lander carrying a commercial rover that is expected to launch no earlier than mid-26. Stoke is developing its Nova rocket, a medium-lift vehicle whose first and second stages are both designed for reuse. It's also raised $510 million to fund operations for these first launches. Apex is working to scale satellite production for both national security missions and commercial constellations. And the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab is working on a car-sized octocopter to explore the surface of a distant world. For this fireside chat tonight, I'd like to invite Marshall Smith, the CEO of Starlab Space, to the stage. He guides the company's vision, strategy, and success. Previously, he worked at NASA for 37 years. Marshall, come on. Hey, thanks. Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks.
So, I want to start. Tell me about that time when you first fell in love with space. Then you said, "Hey, this is cool, and this is something that I want to be a part of." Was it something that was science fiction related, or was it something else?
It actually was. I grew up an Air Force brat. My dad would go all over. I lived on air bases, and I really involved in aviation. And just watching, would be on the playground and watching these planes fly right over top of the playground, and everybody looking up and, wow, I want to do that one day. And of course, I'm old, so I got to watch some of the late Apollo missions live. I remember them, and just really being excited about it, carrying around my Apollo rocket. And then, of course, science fiction on TV and getting involved in all of that. And, it just became something that I go, this is something that we could really make happen. So I joined NASA. I was an intern. I went to co-op programs, we called it back then. And I started off in airplanes because that was my first love. But I eventually moved into Earth satellite missions, Mars missions, and then got involved in Ares 1X, which was the first rocket NASA had built since Shuttle. And I was the chief engineer for that, and that was when it just sparked. That was when I was like, I want to do this. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my career, is building big space systems. And again, to the goal to eventually have people living and working in space. So I did that for quite a while. Then Voyager called and said, "Hey, we're building a commercial space station," and that's the next step. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm in."
And was there a moment where you thought, like, "Oh, this is feasible. This isn't just something that feels like a pipe dream, or that this is closer than I expected"?
Yeah, I think so. Right before I left NASA, I spent a good bit of time, working on going to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And one of the reasons we were doing that, when I say we, NASA, was saying we're going to step back from LEO and turn that over to commercial space. Because the ISS, I'll just throw a plug in. Yesterday was 25 years for ISS, permanent crew on ISS. And the ISS wasn't built by the government. We say it was built by the government. It was actually built by companies. The companies at Airbus and Lockheed and all the other companies that are out there, Boeing, et cetera, MDA Space, things like that. The commercial capability has been out there. It's been up and running and operating. So the question is, Can companies go build and operate these things on their own and get those funded and invested? Absolutely. And that's, to me, the first step that we're taking toward actually making an economy in space that is not just funded and propped up by the government.
Yeah. Why do you think it felt so far away, though? Because I think a lot of people will still say commercial space stations feel far away.
They do feel that way to some people. I think if you're involved in the day-to-day, you see the demand and the need. I'll just throw out a little plug, for example. We have 55% of our commercial space reserved already, and we're still, years away from launching. And that's demand right there. So we're not worried about the market or what's going to happen. And of course, as prices come down, as it becomes easy for launch, as well as being in space and operating their payloads, it's going to make a big difference. There's also things that, like the International Space Station, for example. When you launch and fly a payload on the International Space Station, the government or many governments are involved, and then there's IP restrictions and things like that. Commercial space station, you don't have to do that. We can make arrangements and deals with companies, release that IP, and that actually transforms the interest that commercial companies would have. It's, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to share this cancer drug with so-and-so, we can come up with some other arrangements. That, I think, you're going to see a major shift and change in technology that's going to want to use microgravity.
So let's back up a minute. And you work at Starlab. Tell us about the commercial space station you envision.
Yeah.
And basically what it would look like, how it would operate, just go through the basics there, the fundamentals.
Yeah, so there was a picture up there briefly. I don't know if it's still there. It's actually very large. It's about 40% the pressurized volume of the ISS. The ISS, when it was built, was sized because that was the biggest module that would fit in the back of a space shuttle. And, that's just the way it is. So we're not limited to that anymore. We have very large vehicles that are being developed today. And I have no doubts in my mind, we'll be there and ready to go, when we're ready to launch. Because we're just going to orbit. We're not trying to go to the moon and land and other things like that. We're going to orbit, and we'll be dropped off in orbit. So those volumes are much, much larger. So, for example, this vehicle is 40%, like I said, the pressurized volume of the ISS. It has 3 floors, if you will, 3 levels. They're very large levels. Matter of fact, we were just at the international conference recently, and we had a full-size mock-up, and everybody would walk around and go, holy cow, this is huge. Yeah. It is a sea change in the way we do business. Payload capability, we have 100% of the research payload capability that the ISS has, not counting the external payloads, which we have loads of external payload capability as well. And so when I say we're 55% reserved, we've got 55% of the ISS already reserved, ready to go, which is going to be huge. The other thing is, it's designed differently than the ISS. The ISS, when it was designed, it was about getting these countries to work together, which I'll talk about in a second. And I was actually in the room when somebody said, okay, now what do we do? when we declared it was done. And if you go look at the ISS, you see things, there's cables and wires everywhere, stuff just kind of jammed in everywhere. It's because it wasn't designed really with research in mind, per se. That's what we're doing, is we're designing this first Starlab as a research system, a science system. It's designed around, the payload bays. It's designed around giving proper video and communication capability and control and AI systems to these payloads and research systems, so they can be used, get data down to the center, and also be able to take hardware, take equipment and things we build on it out. So, and then of course, finally, it's designed. ISS was designed by engineers for engineers. That's the way I like to say it.
And it looks like it.
It looks like it, and it feels like it, and it actually smells like it.
Yeah.
So we've partnered with Hilton, for example. That's one of our partners, as well as a company called Journey, which...
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
If you see the Sphere out in Las Vegas, they are behind that. So we're partnering with, again, this is different than what the government would normally do. We're partnering with people that have a lot of experience in hospitality and dealing with people and the smells and all kinds of other things like that. And they're bringing that expertise to our designs. And so,
So what does that mean? Like, what does it look like? Because I think, I think a lot of us probably have an experience of, oh, here's a feed of an astronaut, and there's just wires everywhere behind them, or experiments everywhere behind them. And then some of the images you guys have presented, either with Hilton or with Journey, it looks like an office space or a WeWork or a hotel room, something like that. And it's much more clean.
Yeah, it's very clean, and one of the reasons we can do that is because with size, we actually can put things behind panels and other things like that where we don't have to have them all sit out. In the ISS, it's very difficult to maintain things because you can't get access to them because you can't get around behind them. And in our case, we can design for that kind of capability. So it lets us to control the clutter a lot better than you currently can do today. Also, for example, the Hilton team, when we went to them and we're talking to them and they're like, well, wait a minute, we don't have to be sleeping on the floor. We can sleep anywhere, or we can do different things. It was like, and these guys were...
They're not your traditional space partner.
No, and they are wide open with ideas, and they came in and presented some extremely unique ideas, which I can't go into because they're patented or in the process, but just to help crew sleep. The sleeping in space is really difficult. Talk to most astronauts. Some of them love them. The majority of them say it's very difficult because your body is just used to gravity, and having a blanket on you, for example, or things like that, or feel the pressure, and without that pressure, some people have a difficult time. So they've come up with ways to make that a much more enjoyable experience. We want to make it a pleasurable experience as well as useful.
Yeah. So it's now November 2025. You guys are hoping to launch 2029.
Yes.
What has to happen between now and then?
A lot of work.
Yeah.
So we've been designing, developing. When I talked about our team, we actually Starlab is a joint venture. It's an international joint venture between Voyager, Airbus, Mitsubishi, Palantir, MDA Space, which is the Canada arm. So all these entities. Oh, and we just added SAS, which is a Belgian company, Space Applications Services. It's doing payloads and other systems. So the reason I bring all those up is because all of us, including Voyager, who's doing things on the ISS, have built and operated systems in space. And what we need to do is take those systems, we design those systems, and next we're turning to manufacturing. So we've just finished all of our subsystem PDRs. Well, I think we have one more week next week.
Program design reviews?
All of our preliminary design reviews, thank you. And then we're going to start our critical design review in December. And then we'll start that phase of process. But we're already turning on hardware, manufacturing, we're building structures, we're doing power systems, all of the hard work. We've got to design and integrate it and build it and test it. And then we'll be ready to go. So a lot of work to go. But one of the things we can do is we can move at the speed of commercial. When I was in the government, it would take me 2 years to go, say, buy something that might cost $50 million because of the procurement regulations. I literally can do it in 2 months in industry. It makes a huge difference. So a lot of people that are in the traditional mindset of how long it takes things to happen, it takes that long usually because the government is either involved or driving those things. But when they're not, and when you can do things at the speed of commercial, it makes a huge difference in how you move forward.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with safety or anything else. And people say, going that fast is not safe. That's not true at all. It's not sacrificing a thing in that respect.
What do you think the risks are right now to meet that 2029 deadline?
The risk to meet that 2029 deadline? Well, always something always comes up, and when you're building something this big, as I've done a lot of large space projects, there's always, I call it controlled chaos. And so you've always got to be looking at the unexpected, and so you've got to spend your time making sure you're managing the little things. Like, for example, I was working on a program one time, everything was going great. We had, literally thousands of things coming together at once, and we had a problem with the wiring harness, that was used to plug into the flight computers. Somebody didn't order a part. Well, what do? It could take the entire program down for 6 months, so then you got to go solve those problems. So that's the process of building flight hardware, is constantly managing every single thing, and that's the risk that you run at that point. But from a technology risk, though, I don't really see, again, we've been building and operating these systems in space. That's one of the reasons NASA turned over low Earth orbit, so that they can go do the harder things, which is the moon, Mars, and beyond. And the technology's there, it exists, it's a matter of going and doing it. The harder part is managing the people, getting the right teams, keeping them engaged, that kind of thing, which is something I really enjoy doing.
You mentioned the 25th anniversary of the International Space Station, and there's, I don't know if debate's maybe the right word, but there's certainly discussion right now about this idea of a continuous heartbeat in space, and I wanted to hear kind of what your thoughts were on that, and how you feel, should there be a continuous heartbeat in space?
Yeah. Great question. As a matter of fact, I know the debate's been raging as of even today.
Yeah.
So, but I have a certain opinion on it, is we've built, for the last 25 years, we've built an industry and a market around being able to live and work in space. And if we were going up like we did in the shuttle days, where we go up and we're there for a few weeks and we come home, or maybe we even leave something there and then we come home. First of all, most experiments, even today, even with advanced capabilities, need human interaction and need people to be engaged. That's going to continue. I don't see that changing. And number two, what will it do to our overall industry? For example, if I'm only going to go up for 30 days, I don't need to have visiting vehicles delivering tons of cargo. People aren't living there. You just bring it with you for the most part. And that will make a huge difference. And then when the time comes to maybe spin that back up, maybe you talk about it being a gap, that's going to be a lot harder to do, because companies aren't in business just to waiting around, for several years for that to come back.
You got to keep the production line.
You got to keep it going. Yeah. So I think it will be very hard on the market, number one. Number two, we look at other stations that are out there. We'll just leave that alone. But they have their full-time developing capability that is actually hypersonic missile material, things like that. Those are things that you can't do on the ground, and not something that I think I would want to relinquish just because we feel like there might need to be a gap. I don't think there needs to be a gap. I think in reality, we let companies decide what they want to go build based on the commercial market and commercial needs out there, and that most of the money is privately funded anyway. It's not like commercial crew or commercial cargo programs that were 95% funded by the U.S. government. In this case, for CLD program, it's actually more like 70-30 or something along those lines, maybe 40-60 at best.
Yeah.
So when private equity and private markets are funding this, you need to let the business model, stay what needs to be done.
Is there a prestige factor too? Like just simply saying, hey, we've
Sure.
had this continue? Like,
I think that's a possibility. That's possibly true, but to me, it's not really about just that. I think that's true. I think it truly is something I think is necessary.
It's more of a business decision.
For business, I think it's necessary for national security. I think it's necessary for how we move forward as a global entity. If we're not there, then where are people going to go? They'll go somewhere else, and I don't think that's what we want.
Can you talk a little bit about the market for commercial space stations? Because I think that's something that's hard to grasp. Or when you describe it to people,
Yeah.
I think we were just starting to understand the market for space tourism, and we've seen that a little bit with Blue Origin. But how do you see Starlab as potentially a destination, or how many Starlabs could there be?
Well, so this is Starlab 1 we're building,
Yep.
and it's designed around science and research because that is the kind of the market we have right now. It's mostly government and private industry funded, has been in the past. I think you're going to see that it's going to start off that way, but you're going to see quite a bit of private industry. As I said, we've already 55% commercially reserved, so you're going to see that that shift quite a bit. And then on top of that, the market is really in the things that have been tested and we know work in space. For example, biopharma, cancer drugs that have been developed. You're going to see that go on
the
steroids.
Space manufacture, this idea of in-space manufacturing.
In-space manufacturing of, it sounds kind of science fiction-ish, but 10 years from now, you might
That's what we're here for.
That's right. You might be getting your kidney printed in space, in 15, 20 years. Those are real things that have been talked about and could happen. And so I see Starlab 1 as science and research. Starlab 2 could be about manufacturing. And of course, the cost is going to come down quite a bit from Starlab 1 to Starlab 2 to Starlab 3 to Starlab 4. It could actually be very affordable. A country could have their own Starlab, for example.
You talked about the investment piece here. I think you've been on both sides of this with NASA, but there's the federal government investment, there's university research, there's private sector development. How have your views on this changed, and how do they each kind of play a role in furthering the space economy here?
Yeah, interesting point. When I was in the government, typically in the government, you're not trained to understand private markets very well. That's just not what you do. You worry about how much money Congress is going to give you and those types of things and how to deal with that. But coming out and being in private industry and seeing this market and what's going on, I think I've really understood that investors are interested in one thing: making money. I mean, that's what we all do when we put our money in the stock market or anything else. And I think when they see commitment from the government, they're all in. They're all in. I see this happen all the time about committing to funding, say, some of these systems that you had up there, Apex and other people like that, and ourselves as well. But I think it takes commitment from the government, so that's one key part of it. And then when you deal with universities and private institutions, those types of things, they're all in as well, because that will accelerate what they get paid for, which is research and producing research. And using a facility like Starlab will really accelerate that. And so we're partnered with, for example, Ohio State. That's one of our partners. And we have a science park where we're using science park capabilities. We call it VISTA. And that science park has taken the model that we use on Earth and extending it into space to accelerate the research path to get to space. So between all of those three and getting those all engaged, I think is a really big part of our model.
It's difficult too. I think it's difficult just to keep that ecosystem working the way I think all three legs of that stool would want it to work.
It is a juggling act sometimes,
Yeah.
but everybody's motivated to do it. I think the difficulty comes in when, say, somebody says, "Oh, we're going to do this instead of that," and then the markets kind of get perturbated.
And I think we've seen a lot of that the last probably decade or so. There's been a shift in priorities.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's talk about one other news item here, which is you talked about the CLD program, Commercial Low Earth Orbit Destinations Program. There's been some changes there, getting away from fixed price contracts, using agreements to help develop these space stations. What's your view on kind of how to best, to the last point, how can NASA best help further development of this area?
Yeah, I've been very clear with NASA and people I used to work with about things.
And what have you said?
What I've actually said to them is industry needs commitment. The longer you don't commit to a path, the less investment you'll get. And I've heard this, and I'm going to say it for you guys. I've heard this, people say, well, we don't have enough money because there's this model that some government people have, is that the only money that I have is what I'm going to give you. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, you're not supposed to have enough money. That's not the point. The point is you commit to a path, we'll go raise the money. Don't worry about that. We got that. And I think that's the key thing. And so any approach, I want to make sure, one, the government gives commitment very quickly. That will help kick this off. And number two, don't be prescriptive on how you go do the job. For example, we, in our particular case, we're using very robust, well-known, well-understood high TRLs, technology readiness level, which basically means it's been flown before. For those of you who aren't aware of it, we're using a very use a system that's very well known and components and parts that are well known. Don't tell me I have to do a particular type of mission, because that might not fit into my business model. And the business model's got to be built around what public and private partners, investors want to see. Sure, we'll go make sure it works before you go fly on it. That's fine, but let us develop that path. So those are the two things that I've told the government.
Yeah, we got about 2 minutes left here. Let's say it's 2030. We're coming back for another version of the Discovery series. What do you hope has happened? Like, what changes do you think have happened? What kind of successes do you hope to have had? And what else do you see changing within the space industry between now and then?
Yeah,
2 minutes.
Yeah, wow. I have a lot to say, 2 minutes. So short story is, we're going to be in operation. We're going to be on orbit. We're going to be fully subscribed. We're going to be developing cancer drugs. We're going to be developing the basis for kidneys and retinal implants and those types of things. To me, it's like you have an iPhone. When iPhones came out, people go and they look at it and go, well, what do I do with this? And now you can't live without it. I see that happening. We are now going to unleash commercial in space to go do the things that I actually can't even imagine today. I really can't. I can think about the things that we know about, but there are things that none of us have any insight into. AI is going to make a big impact in that as well.
All right, hit me. Say something specific about AI, because we were talking.
Well, for example, we're going to use AI in operation systems and development. We're using it today in design and development of our systems. We'll use it in operations. We'll take what used to take 200 people, and we'll get it done in a week. Literally, we're doing that right now. And for example, if we're operating the system, and in the past, if you had to make a change to your logistics systems, it would take you weeks to redo everything. We can do it literally in an hour, those types of things. And we do it with one person and not 100 people or 50 people or with those types of things. So huge impacts there. But honestly, in 2030, what I want to see is this market taking off, because we're going to get the use. We're going to start seeing the inputs, and we'll be building Starlab 2 and Starlab 3.
Yeah. Great. Marshall, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming.